was thinking about that desk chair I ordered a while back, the one that showed up with a leg missing.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. But it got me thinking about this whole quality thing, especially after digging into this presentation you sent over.
Oh, absolutely.
Turns out quality management systems, or QMS as I guess the cool kids call them,
Yeah.
are about way more than just making sure your furniture arrives intact.
That's right. You hit the nail on the head. There's some really eye-opening stuff in this presentation about how QMS is really about exceeding customer expectations,
Yeah.
like at every single point imaginable. And we're not just talking about a product that, functions properly. It's the whole experience.
Okay, so less about putting out fires and more about like fireproofing the whole building.
Exactly. It's about building quality into the very DNA of a company.
Hmm.
And this presentation, it really challenges the traditional view of quality management. It's about a much more holistic approach.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, so there's this point in here about how exceeding expectations, well, it doesn't just make a customer happy, right?
Right.
It can actually make them more valuable to a company,
Oh, interesting.
like way more valuable in the long run.
Now, that's what I call a win-win. But let's be real for a sec. Some companies might be thinking, why bother? Maybe they think this whole quality thing is just an added expense or that good enough is, well, good enough. What would you say to them?
You see, that's where I think they might be missing the bigger picture. And this presentation does a brilliant job of highlighting what it calls the domino effect of defects.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about this domino
All right,
effect.
so imagine a company, let's say, oh, I don't know, a high-end coffee machine company, right?
Okay, yeah, I like where this is going.
So they decide to cut some corners on some internal components, save a few bucks.
Right.
Everything seems fine at first. But then, boom, a whole batch of machines hits the market and they start malfunctioning.
Ouch. Not a good look for a high-end brand.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're looking at a recall, frustrated customers, social media blowing up with negative reviews. It's a PR nightmare.
Yeah,
And the damage to their reputation, that's tough to recover from.
absolutely.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Really?
You've got wasted resources, the hit to employee morale. I mean, the list goes on and on.
You're really making me rethink how much those quality slip-ups can cost a company, not just in dollars and cents, but in like the long-term health of the business.
Exactly.
Okay, so bad quality equals bad news. But how does a quality management system actually prevent this kind of disaster from happening in the first place?
Well, it's not magic, but it does bring a certain level of clarity, I guess, that can feel pretty magical when it's done right.
Okay.
One of the key things that QMS does is it provides clear roles and responsibilities within an organization, so everyone knows what's expected of them, who's accountable for what.
So instead of a chaotic free-for-all, you've got everyone working from the same playbook.
Exactly. You can think of it like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Every cog knows its function. And this clarity leads to better decisions, more streamlined processes, and crucially, accountability. When everyone's on the same page, it's far less likely that a major quality issue is going to slip through the cracks.
I like the sound of that.
Mm.
No more finger pointing, just everyone working together to achieve that same level of quality. All right, so we've established that QMS is about way more than just checking boxes. This presentation does mention some challenges. Are we ready to dive into those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about those challenges because even the best ideas, sometimes they don't always translate smoothly into reality.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this presentation actually does a really good job of outlining some of the real-world hurdles that companies face when they try to implement a QMS.
And one that really stood out to me was this whole idea of resistance to change.
Right.
I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you try to get your team to adopt a new system or you finally decide to switch to a better project management tool.
Right.
And it can feel like you're trying to move a mountain.
It's that human element, that often trips us up. We like what we know.
Right.
Even if
Yeah.
what we know isn't really the best way or the most efficient way or,
It's comfortable.
it's comfortable. Exactly. Change is hard,
Yeah.
even when it's for the better.
It's like that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well-
But sometimes fixing it, or at least giving it a little tune-up, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely.
So how do you overcome that resistance to change? How do you get people on board?
Well, the presentation really emphasizes the importance of leadership buy-in.
Okay.
And it's not enough for management to just say, okay, we're doing this new quality management system thing now. Everybody get on board.
Right.
They need to champion it. They need to demonstrate its value. They need to actively participate in the process.
Lead by example, walk the walk.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of quality from the top down.
Okay.
When employees see that leadership is truly invested, they're much more likely to get on board.
So we've got buy-in from the top. But what about getting everyone else on the same page? I mean, how do you actually go about implementing a quality management system across an entire company? Like, where do you even begin?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another big challenge that this presentation highlights,
Okay.
and that is the need for integration across departments.
Right.
You can't just have, siloed.
Because quality isn't something that can just be confined to a single department, right? It's not the quality control team's problem.
Exactly.
It needs to be like woven into the fabric of the entire organization.
100%. A truly robust QMS, it touches every aspect of a company, from product development to marketing to customer service.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
It's like I'm imagining a company where everyone, no matter what their role is, they understand how their work contributes to this bigger picture of quality.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
It's about moving away from that mindset of, that's not my job,
Right?
to a more collaborative approach where everyone feels a sense of ownership over quality.
Okay, so we've got leadership buy-in, we've got this cross-departmental collaboration.
Right.
What else do we need to consider when we're talking about, the real-world challenges of implementing a QMS?
Right.
Because this presentation also talks about the importance of measuring and monitoring, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear your take on that.
So this is where things get really interesting, right?
Right.
Because it's not enough to just say, we care about quality. You actually have to track it, you have to measure it, and then you need to use that data to actually drive continuous improvement.
So data plays a really crucial role.
Oh, absolutely.
But isn't there a risk of getting overwhelmed by data?
Sure.
I mean, what if you end up with, just spreadsheets and spreadsheets full of numbers,
Right.
but no clear idea of what they actually mean or how to use them effectively?
Yeah, that's a really common pitfall, actually.
Yeah.
Gathering data is important, but it's only valuable if it's actionable.
Okay.
The way I like to think about it is, it's like having this fancy car dashboard
Okay.
with all the bells and whistles, but you never check the fuel gauge or the speedometer.
Okay, I love that analogy.
Right.
Because you're saying it's not about drowning in data, it's about extracting those really meaningful insights that can actually guide your decision making.
100%. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's about transforming data from this, passive observer into an active driver of continuous improvement.
Okay, so how do we avoid falling into that trap of data overload?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we're using data effectively to enhance quality and not just collecting it for the sake of it? So we've talked about actionable data, right? But how do we actually go from like a spreadsheet full of numbers to making those meaningful improvements? Like, what are other companies actually doing?
Well, this presentation actually highlights a few key strategies, and one that really stood out to me was the use of data visualization tools and dashboards. Because, it's one thing to look at rows and columns of numbers, but it's a lot easier to spot trends and identify areas for improvement when you can actually see the data presented visually.
Yeah, it's like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 spreadsheets or something like that.
Exactly, 1,000 spreadsheets. And the great thing is, a lot of these data visualization tools, they let you track your progress over time. So you can actually see how your efforts are directly impacting your quality metrics.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's these needles moving.
Yeah, because being able to actually see the impact of your work, that's got to be incredibly motivating.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's shift gears for a second, talk about the elephant in the room,
Okay.
the cost.
Right.
This presentation does a good job of highlighting the costs associated with poor quality, all those hidden costs.
Right.
But I'm sure some folks listening are thinking, okay, but isn't implementing a quality management system expensive in itself? What would you say to them?
Well, it's definitely a common concern.
Yeah.
And the presentation actually does a really good job of addressing that head on because it explicitly calls out the cost of not prioritizing quality.
Right.
Things like we've talked about wasted resources, rework, lost customers that hit to your brand reputation.
Right. Like we were talking about earlier with that coffee machine company.
Exactly.
The costs of those quality mishaps can really snowball.
Absolutely. And when you really factor in all of the potential consequences of poor quality,
Yeah.
suddenly investing in a really robust QMS, well, it starts to look less like an expense and more like
Well,
like a smart investment.
exactly, like a smart investment.
Yeah. It's about playing the long game. It's about really understanding that the upfront investment in quality can actually be, well, a lot less than the potential long-term costs of ignoring it.
So it's not about cutting corners to save a quick buck. It's about making those strategic investments that set you up for, lasting success.
100%.
Okay, so you've really sold me on the why of QMS.
Okay.
But I always like to end on a really strong example. So do you have any stories of companies that are successfully implementing a QMS in a way that really just clicks?
Oh, absolutely. And there's this case study that's mentioned in this presentation that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it was about this software company. And they were struggling with customer support tickets, just like an overwhelming number of customer support tickets.
Yeah, I've been there.
And so they decided to implement what they called a closed-loop feedback system
Okay.
as part of their QMS,
Okay.
which allowed them to gather, track, and analyze customer issues in a really systematic way.
So they're not just reacting to individual complaints in a silo, but instead they're using those customer interactions to identify larger patterns and trends.
Exactly.
And then I'm guessing use that information to actually improve their products and services.
Exactly. And here's the thing. By analyzing the data from this feedback system, they were able to identify the root causes of 80% of their customer issues.
80%. Wow. That is 80%.
That's huge.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What kind of impact did that have on their business overall? So, on a practical level, they saw this dramatic reduction in customer support tickets,
Yeah.
which then freed up their team to focus on other things, more proactive tasks.
Right, because they're not always putting out fires.
Exactly. But more importantly, their customer satisfaction scores, they went through the roof.
That is a powerful example of how this commitment to quality can have such a ripple effect across an organization. I love that.
It really is. And at the end of the day, this isn't just about ticking boxes.
Right.
It's about creating that culture of continuous improvement.
Well said. As we start to wrap up our deep dive today, it seems like the key takeaway here is that quality management is so much more than just a set of procedures or a department. It's about fostering this mindset of excellence across every single aspect of a company.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's about embracing data, not fearing it,
Right.
and then using it as this tool to really drive meaningful change.
Yeah.
It's about making that conscious decision to prioritize quality in everything you do.
Yeah.
Every decision, big or small.
Well said.
And I think that's a great place to leave it for today. So for everyone listening, we'd love for you to kind of ponder this. How would your work or even your life be different if you applied this quality-focused approach more broadly, not just at your job, but just in your everyday life, your everyday interactions and decisions? It's something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.